Is unmuted. There we go. And there we go. It's
Oh,
what's going on? Let's go. It's sales chatter, man. What's going on? Happy Monday.
what's happening,
Or
brother? I
Tuesday.
just finished saying I was like literally having a coughing attack 2 seconds ago. I look up and there's like 2 seconds left before we go live. I'm like, oh, this is just gonna be fantastic.
Yeah. It's gonna be great to kind of see what's going on. But hey, man, what'd you get up to? I know yesterday we had a holiday here in Toronto, so
Yeah.
definitely took advantage of that. Definitely rested up. I went and saw Haunted Mansion. That was a great movie, Disney movie. It's based off of the ride at Disneyland, and you'd think it was a kid. I don't know, Dan. I don't know what's going on these days, but all these movies that you think are kids' movies, like Barbie, Haunted Mansion, and I haven't seen any other movies, but they're more like adult themed. It's pretty crazy
I
how
think
the
that's since
evolution. Yeah.
Shrek. I think that's since Shrek. And I mean, I know you don't, I don't know if you ever back in the day saw Shrek, but I remember we had, when my kids were young, Shrek came out. And it was like the first Pixar, whatever, I think it was Pixar or whatever movie where it
Mhm.
had like adult themes and kind of adult jokes and kid jokes. And that was the first movie I can remember that where they started turning towards entertaining adults as well.
Nice. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that. I can see that. You just make like these little inside jokes. You know what? Maybe it's been happening forever, but we were just at different stages in our life. So maybe like the kids'
Yeah.
movies that we grew up watching, like Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and all that stuff. Maybe there's some adult tones there as well. But
I
Daniel,
bet.
what'd you get up to?
It was a great weekend, man. Got a lot of work done. Enjoyed myself, relaxed. Got more work done. It just seems like work's always there, but it's fun. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense. So doing a
Oh
lot
yeah.
of development this weekend, a lot of inside thinking, a lot of content idea creations, because we got some busy times coming up, man.
We definitely do. We definitely do. And one of the big things, I think anything can be changed with that, with just one tool. I got something yesterday. I saw it on TikTok, and then I went and bought it on Amazon. It's called the Daily Time Blocking Planner.
Yeah.
And honestly, this has been like a game changer. Today has been day one that I've using it, but I'll show kind of like what it kind of shows. It has like basically a block list of things that you need to do, your goals, even your lunch. I'm sorry, your meals that you got to eat for your day. And I'm loving this. It's actually keeping me on schedule this morning. Like I've
Good.
already, yeah, I ran like 2 kilometers this morning. I got my back workout in. I took my pro. Like I'm good. I'm fired up and I'm ready to go. So about us, man. Enough about us. Today we have an amazing guest, Dan. That it's funny how the LinkedIn community has always kind of connected people, right? And for the
Yeah.
right things. I know we had Anthony on last week talking about the algorithm and things like that. But, for any social media out there, Dan, it's really about connecting people. And honestly, just being able to have networking conversations and not necessarily about work. And the guest that we have today, Dan, she's exactly like that. Like we've had a couple chats back and forth. She's actually a podcast host as well. She actually has a show, I believe it's called Case of the Mondays. Every Monday that I'll actually do it next
I've
Monday.
seen that. Yes.
Yes, it's awesome. And you know what? You know what I found out, Dan? She's actually a narrator. She's I don't know if she still does it, but in her past, she was like an audiobook narrator, which is pretty cool. And she actually works with like the local YMCA to help kids, to kind of help their speech and their academics and things like that with reading, like their vocabulary and stuff. So, anyways, enough about that. Let's bring
Bring
on
her on.
yeah, let's bring her on because like you know what? Today's when we're talking backstage and we're like, okay, let's talk about this topic, and we're like, we did not plan this out at all. So we're looking forward to having this conversation with Theresa
Well, I
Dunlop.
noticed we've got like increase your sales in one day, and then we've got are you really consistent on another one. So I'm looking forward to hearing what we're going to go for here.
Oh yeah, that's what we're kind of going. Good morning, Teresa. Welcome to Sales Chatter Live. How you doing this morning?
Hi, Ryan. Hi, Dan. Thank you so much. So, I'm so glad to be here and to talk about actually being consistent can increase your sales. I think that if we had two topics, that's fine.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Because like what Dan kind of always kind of says, that consistency will make it happen, And for us, when we're kind of bringing on amazing guests like yourself, we want to have these conversations from different lens because Dan knows how to sell, I know how to sell, the various people who watch they know how to sell, but just having that different viewpoint. So, Teresa, can you give the audience a little bit of background about who you are, what your background is, and even tell us a little bit how did you get into podcasting as well?
So my background, a majority of my career has been in logistics, sales, and transportation, um, through mainly through UPS, and then I jumped into the international container services a couple years back, which I really enjoy. It's super challenging. Before that, I kind of bounced back and forth between like three different industries, but I think the one that stuck with me the most was logistics, and I've just kind of, I think I just dove into it like I'm just going to give this a try and see what happens, and then it just kind of gets in your blood, and that's just you that now that's what you do. Like when in those frustrating moments where I'm like I would do anything else, I'm kind of like, but what would I do? Because this is what I know. So um, I keep going with it, and I had a little bit of a experience with education. I think growing up in the 80s, I just, I went to school and it was rough. And I just, the theme in my report, I'm sure if I could go back and open that file, is just not a good student. I just felt like, okay, well, the law says I have to be here, so I'm going to do it. I want to get in trouble. But then I left traditional school and went to college and kind of uncovered that I actually am a good student. I actually love learning. It really kind of just opened up a whole different side of myself. So later I dabbled in the idea of working in education, but there was just money in logistics and sales, and I had started out with a degree in business, so I could kind of go either way. But when that opportunity opened up, I just kind of put myself into it, and now I'm here. So, but in my personal time and on the side, I think kind of figuring out how my learning style was, and then realizing that it wasn't a lost thing. Like I didn't have to just accept a limitation or something like that. And once I think I actually spoke to someone and they were like, oh, well, this topic over here is actually a skill. You're not born with it. If you just get exposure, you'll get better at it. And I was like, I didn't get that conversation. Like I grew up thinking like, okay, you were just like born and this is who you are. And, and there's nothing you can do about it. So that's where I love being able to find some opportunities to, even if it's a temporary situation, work with children, especially because I feel like we don't do enough to tap into that particular area of our communities, as far as encouraging them to love learning and to find themselves through different opportunities to work with education. But we're here to talk about logistics, so that's just kind of the two sides of me, I guess. And as far as podcasting, so I started attending the live streams at first on LinkedIn just to kind of connect with people in the industry, hear about what's going on in different aspects of it, and see if I could pull some things from people that would be helpful to me as a professional and in front of customers, and to make their businesses better. So I started out just as an attendee and a viewer, and realized that I'm in a part of the industry that doesn't really get represented often out in public, and I felt like the domestic people were just having a whole lot of fun, and international was really kind of missing out. And so I just kind of decided that I would create one, and the Case of the Mondays was just really aligned with me because For years, I was a morning person, like 5 a.m. To your point, get up, get a bunch of stuff done before even 8 o'clock, and have lived, like, enjoyed a big portion of the day. And then a few years back, I just kind of made this complete switch where, like, the mornings are a little less, um, aligned, and it just kind of goes into that whole idea. You go into work and you have to, like, kind of kickstart yourself and find ways to trick your mind and things like that. So, and I enjoyed the movie The Office. It was just, iconic and funny, and that just kind of put everything together for me.
It's interesting you said that the international part is an unrecognized part, but yet the international side, the container side of shipping is 93% of where we get our freight for trucks. And,
Yeah.
you know, it is probably the most vital part of everything we do because we don't produce 90 something percent of the stuff we consume. It's all from overseas, right? And I love the fact that you opened up a conversation about that. I think that's critical because
Yeah.
as a freight salesperson, logistics rep, understanding that part of the business can help you open up present clients in a way that you've never opened them up before. Because it's most likely if you're doing OTR, if you're doing LTL or truckload or warehousing or whatever, there's so many other facets of that customer's business that you can actually, you want to talk about raising your sales in one day, set all your clients up for calls to talk to them about other parts of their business in 1 or 2 days, and you can almost double your business like that because they already
Yeah.
trust you.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, and I think so I don't remember exactly when this came into play, and it could have just been my experience and my exposure, but when I started in logistics sales, sales was like the department of people. It was a people relationship, situational, kind of thing. And at some point, there kind of was this. I think all salespeople are kind of like, oh, I'd love to bridge the gap between operations and sales. And then they're sort of turned into this, like, meshing of operations and sales. And the the part of that I think is kind of showing up is that for operational sales, that can be very activity oriented versus sales in its tradition is people relationships. And so sometimes my calls are not, they can be great calls and I can build relationships, but they're not fast. Like, I don't necessarily have calls where, like, I call up, I ask for the person, they just batch me through without any question, and then we get to this perfect conversation, and by 30 minutes later, I'm closing their entire business. Like, it doesn't,
If only.
work like
If
that.
only.
Yeah, right. If I could just do it like that. So these
I don't
are
think it's
really
ever existed like that, but
well, we have managers that are asking for it. So, but I think as you get in the operational mindset of, I'm just going to call up and I'm going to ask these questions, and the day will just be this, and I'll just ask, and then there'll be that one. And I think there's so much more that you can do in business relationships if you're actually interested in talking to the person, if you're actually interested in kind of uncovering the full business. And sometimes that means you have to put, like, your agenda aside for a minute and get to it at that point. So, Dan, to your point, sometimes it is great to call up, talk about some other aspect of the business, and then I heard this quote, or I guess it's not a quote, it's more like a statement, but they quoted Howard Stern at the end of every meeting he does. He's kind of like, okay, we've covered everything, so now let's talk about real stuff, and everybody relaxes, and I think that I just like to get into, attend things and listen to people, because I'll pull out little pieces. I'm like, okay, I love that. I'm going to try to see what I can do, my version of that. and see how that goes. And I love that he does that. He's like, okay, we'll have this crafted conversation, and then let's just get to know each other, kind of thing. And I think that's so important. Even if you call up a company and they don't end up being matched with you, I like to build those relationships, because you never know when you're going to run into the person they actually need, and how powerful that is to be a connector and be able to solve a problem that may not be your solution. So I feel like, Dan, to your point, we want to know the business. We don't want to just know, like, I'm just interested in your transportation. I joked with okay, you guys, I hope you can take my personality, but I joked with a friend, and I said, making calls like that is kind of like when you go to coffee with someone and you're like, oh, well, you're not that kind of person. Well, here's the the charge for your coffee. It's kind of it's very one-sided. So, and I came up in sales where it's a relational and a situational setting that's collaborative. There's two sides of it. Everybody wants to win. You don't want to bear down on your customers and make things hard for them, because that's not gonna bring you a long-term commitment.
Well, yeah, you talk about that, right? And it's all like I've always been the believer of having customer relationships and being that person who can talk shop or talk anything with them and understand that, hey, it's going to take a mile. Like, there's so many times, Dan, we talk about this on the show so much, Teresa, that we're saying, hey, there's so many times we had so many good calls, like great calls, and you feel like you're getting it, and then there's crickets after, or either they ghost you or something like that. But one of the biggest things that you've kind of talked about, and then I would love to pick your mind about, is how do we actually stay consistent when we kind of get those like ebbs and flows of this industry and have fun with it? Like you mentioned before, it was more of a people's, like sales is a people person relationship. But how do we stay consistent in our sales cycle, our prospecting, to the fact of, hey, maybe I woke up this morning and I didn't want to do what I needed to do to get me forward? What are some things that you've seen, because you've been through various lines of business as well, Teresa?
So for me, and I think the logistics industry is especially hard on everybody. So for me I like to start with setting up my process, like my daily process for me, and it holds me accountable. So whether I'm like pulling in and it's rugged, or I'm refreshed and energized, I can still get to the goals I have for that day. And we were talking a little bit about CRM, and I love to use the CRM to give myself focus, to say, okay, I don't feel great, but I have these activities set up, and these are the things that I'll just get started. And I think that doing that the day before, it's kind of like they say, lay out your clothes the night before, set everything you need, put the timer on the coffee maker, so the next day you can almost just kind of not think about it. And I think that's the best way to be consistent, is to just pre-plan what you're going to do, and not necessarily like black and white. I mean, obviously there's some parts of it where you got to be free flowing, and something comes in front of you and you just like clear the desk. You're like, forget it. This is what I need, and I'm everything's we just cancel everything. I'm just going to focus on this kind of thing. But I find having that, whether you do it in a planner or your CRM or whatever, but just having that right in front of you where you can see it. Okay, this is what my day is going to be. Then you can start with like that first thing and go from there. And I think our and sales is like that. Once you just do that first thing, the next thing is just naturally after it. So having a well planned out process, and your ability to keep notes and record what's happening right after each thing that you do, I think that's it's very helpful. I can't tell you how many times like I've kind of put something in my calendar for an account that I knew I needed to follow up, but maybe that call happened a month ago. And by keeping good notes, I've been able to kind of like give myself that confidence to make the phone call, because I was able to go back and say, reread, where do we leave off, and what was the objective of following up. So then I can kind of reset. Okay, I remember this person, and this is what's important to them, and then kind of psych myself up to making the phone call and getting that conversation started. So that's some of the things I do to keep myself from, becoming irresponsible and becoming lag and letting everything kind of just fall apart.
I agree with you so much. Having your day set up so when you walk in, it literally takes 2 seconds to understand where you are and what you need to do. Having everything in front of you, so all you have to do is do work, as opposed to figuring things out, organizing things. And it's key to massive productivity. And the only way you lose is if you don't do the work. There's no confusion. Everything's crystal clear. You understand exactly what you need to do, why you need to do it, your primary, secondary objective of what you're doing, so you understand what to write or what to say. All of that is key to consistency, because on days when you really don't want to, when things are set up easily, it's like, okay, I know I have to do this in order to see myself better in 6 months. So it avoids the speed bumps, which turn into mountains, which then we rationalize to ourselves, oh, well, I'll just avoid it for today. I got to clean up my desk, or I got to get more coffee, or I got to do this. It's all BS.
Oh, yeah.
Just get to work.
Yeah, there's definitely a ton of ways to avoid getting started, for sure. But I also I think the other piece of that is more to the individual is just bringing your authentic self. Like, I think some of the best phone calls have been me, just being like, you know what, I'm on coffee cup number 2. It's 9 a.m. I've had 2 so far. I'm just, and the customer saying, oh yeah, totally understand what you're going through, and then breaking the ice and getting going. And I don't script myself. I show up on the phone calls as I am, and I think a lot of times that really is the key thing with building consistency with customers and being authentic. I think people like to work with people they like, and if you seem real, I think people trust that. So
if you are real.
Yeah, so I don't script things. I don't say this repetitive information to people. I really craft it to me and whoever I'm talking to, and I kind of unapologetic about that. And I think that's been very successful for me, whether it's reflected well with my managers or with the company I'm with. I can't speak to that, but I can say customers really like the knowing that you're a real person, that you have interests, and that you're living and not just there to like grab something.
Yeah, and I feel well, and that's the thing. You're talking about being unapologetic yourself if you're real and things like that, and all the things that you're seeing, Theresa. It's been I'm hearing the things you're saying, and it just reminds me when I read Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's one of those things where you kind of set up your days, right? You talk about, hey, put out the workout clothes already the night before. Like every video, I was doing a bunch of went down the rabbit hole last week of productivity and how I can set my days up better. And it's always getting started the night before. It's not that, hey, let me wake up in the morning with a clean slate and then, okay, what am I gonna do? Right? It's like one of the biggest things. Like I said, I go to the gym and I know exactly what I need to work out. I know what machines, I know what workouts I need to do. So I'm in and out of there in like 30-40 minutes, when before I used to spend like an hour or 2 hours there, like, hey, maybe I'll do some cardio, maybe I'll do this workout, maybe I'll do these things. But coming back to, like you said, you set up your CRM for yourself. For anybody who's new out there and they're wanting to get into that habit, or they're looking at the time right now saying, oh my god, it's August, I've really done nothing for the last 8 months, the beginning of the year. On January 1st, I said it was new year, new me, all that fun stuff, but I didn't follow through with that. You're talking about setting it up. If you were to set up your own CRM right now, like brand new from scratch, what would you do?
So, oh my god, that makes it. Okay, so
I had to
you
do that. I had to do that. Sorry, that was funny.
So you have to start out with you would have to start out with like figuring out who you're prospecting, like where what there would. It's definitely a pick an industry, go through as many platforms as you can to find out who's involved in that particular piece, and then get those names into your CRM, and all the details, like fill out the detail right away, and then from there, contacts. I mean, the CRMs are complex, so you want to get that body of information there first thing, and that's the hardest part, is just profiling the customer that you're targeting to talk to, and then from there, you got to spend time. You have to step away from your CRM a little bit and spend time on your customer and figuring out kind of what they're doing and what's important, and where you can kind of like mesh with them. But from there, I set up activities. I'll set up, okay, in 2 minutes, I'm gonna call this customer, so I'll go into the activity, set up in-person call, and then from there, set up a follow-up. You could do that after the call or before the call. Sometimes I do that before the call, because if you get in a great conversation, I mean, there's a mental break you have to take afterwards. I was just sharing with a friend at lunch on Thursday last week that when I was in the corporate office for UPS, we had these little desk pods, and I had coworkers all around me. So I would like call a customer and then talk to my coworker, and then I'd call a customer and then I'd talk to my coworker.
Yes.
And it was to like rest my head and let that information that just happened, like especially calls that you connected, it went perfect, you had exactly what that person needed, and they're gonna buy from you, right? So all that stuff needed to settle, and conversations are, I think people don't realize how much energy you're burning just mentally when you're in a conversation. So I would take these little breaks and like just talk about probably the craziest stuff. In fact, one time I went to the security in the office, and I was like, you guys should sell our office camera film, to like a show, like The Office, just
Yeah.
I know all the stuff that happens in here, but and that kind of thing. There's always inside every office setting. There's always a storyline and a drama. So, but that's kind of how I would mentally refresh myself to be able to even go into another call. As far as the CRM goes, though, I think that you have to be willing to start with the profile, and then create activities and tasks for yourself that commit you to the next day. I have a cycle of my tasks for the next day are all set up. So the first thing I would do when I get to the desk and get into the CRM is to open my tasks and see, what do I have set up for myself today? Okay, so if there's only three tasks, then I'm like, okay, I know that I have to get creative. I have to kind of start with these things, and then after I'm done, my day is not done. I've got to figure out what else is important, and then that leaves room for all the random things that come in from management, and you leave yourself some room for the unexpected. But I do think it's important to at least have a few focal things that you can get going, because once you get into it, I feel like I've had days where it went so good that, and I've worked remote. I've worked remote for years, so my day doesn't just like end at 5 because the building's going to close. I've had times where it's gone like into the evening, and I'm like, oh shoot, I guess I'm hungry. I need dinner.
Yes.
But I think that starting in the CRM, definitely getting the information, because the CRMs, I mean, if they're set up well, they can keep the phone calls low. The Excel sheet reports that people want you to fill out and send off because a department has no visibility. The CRMs, they can be set up to create that information flow that's filtered and broke down for department to department, showing what you're doing and what your production looks like, and then it gives them the idea of how they can support you in front of the customer as well. So I think if I was somebody new and I wanted to get this CRM set up and I wanted to make it as useful as possible, I would definitely profile everything first and do that. I think the one time I did get the chance to really set up a raw CRM system and just from scratch, and that's what I said to the people I was accountable to was that, hey, I'm going to be doing a ton of work so that later I don't have to work as hard. And I went about doing that. And the days were really, really exhausting, like just tons of activities, tons of data entry. But I was really motivated by that, knowing that information, like I think they call it like a living application. You put the
Yeah.
information in, and then it keeps learning from what you're entering and updating. And I kind of saw it as, okay, 6 months from now, I'm not gonna have to work so hard because I'll have this
Yes.
all set up and filled out, and I can just keep going back and drawing off of the same, information. So that's kind of what I would say to somebody that's new, that's gonna set one up, is to not to you know um, to pick at it like, okay, every day I'll find the people first, and then I'll enter them in as
Yeah.
I talk to them. Go ahead and enter information and then update it as you're going.
As you're kind of going along, and that's the
Yeah.
way that I've kind of used my CRMs too, and with Bridger as well. That's a completely different topic, but I'm talking about like the HubSpots and like Salesforce and stuff like that,
Yeah.
right? And it's really
Yeah.
tracking, and I love what you said, because I've had people on different fences say that, hey, I'd rather talk to them first and then enter them into the CRM, or I'll just pop them, or like I'll bulk upload them into the CRM, and then I'll kind of set up my days that way. And one of the biggest issues that I had, Teresa, was the activity actual numbers. And I'm gonna be on the fence of volume is what gets my success. I know there's different people saying like they can do different things, like they like 15 emails, 20. Like I've gotten a certain number that I feel like I like volume to have that conversation. So my biggest thing with CRMs was actually keeping track. Is like I remember the days I go into my sent folder and I like literally count the emails that I've sent, or try to go into the CRM, or have like a digital counter and things like that. And when we you mentioned like the office, like having that setting, I want to go back to what you just said there, because when I used to work in the office, it was exactly like that. I would have a really good call, that dopamine hit when you're like, oh man, this went really well, I need to tell somebody. And that's what I kind of feel like we're kind of lacking a little bit. That I call it a bullpen, like the baseball pitcher is like when all the salespeople are all together, and you hear people saying certain things on the call. It feels like a, what is it, like a stock room trading floor or something like that, right? But
Right.
it
Right.
you know it, you definitely do miss those aspects of the teamwork. And I love that you said that you'll have that conversation just to kind of understand it and go through your emotions, and feel like, okay, was this really a good call, and have that kind of deviate into something completely different. When you're talking about like the consistency, and you mentioned like the known fact that you've talked about here is like, we do the CRM so that when we have somebody that we report to, we can provide them the right data and understand, like, we're not falsifying anything. We're not kind of saying, oh, we're closing this deal this week and then this deal next week, when the truth is like, hey, you haven't updated your CRM in like 2-3 months. One last question for you as we're looking to wrap up here. In terms of like your consistency, you mentioned that set up your CRM for 6 months. What does that look like? So we just talked about day one. What does 6 months from now look like in terms of like having your prospecting and having your sales cycle up and running? Like, do you stop the volume? Do you reduce the volume? Do you keep the same volume throughout? That's kind of going. I'd love to hear about your thought process.
So I don't stop the volume. It's just more of, let's just say, inconsistency. I love the CRM because you can open up the dashboard and you can see, okay, on a good week, I have like 78 activities going out, and on a bad week, I might have like 25, and you can kind of gauge what what you can make goals for yourself and play games to, okay, this week I'm going to try to, I'm having, my week was low last week, so I'm going to try to do, 50, and see if I can build myself back up to that optimal rate of like, to your point, volume. But it's not so much about not adding anymore. It's that once you get a good amount of account volume into your CRM, then you don't have any reason to have an unproductive day. I mean, if you have 200 customers in your, or accounts, I'm sorry, prospects and customers and all of that in your CRM, let's just throw 200 out there. Then honestly, there won't be any days that you don't have something you could just go to, and that way you don't spend so much time thinking, what's going to be the most productive thing I could do today, and then you kind of have to like craft it out of nothing in that moment, and that takes so much time. So that's what I mean by developing all those profiles, is to give yourself enough that you can cycle through without hitting the same people too often, because that's also just another piece of sales. You don't want to call up and you're like, I know I talked to you yesterday, but
got any freight? Anything changed?
Yeah. So you don't want to have like 10 accounts in there and that's all you got for the year, because that's not gonna, that's not gonna give you much to work off of. So I like to really go into an industry, look at who's there, and that's not so much about competitor or this or that. It's more of, I need to understand who's there and that fits into my parameters, and then get them in, and then just touch bases with them every now and again, and keep that a real and authentic interaction.
I love that. That is so, and that's the way that you kind of go. Like, people think that, you need to add so many prospects into the thing. For me, like, I got a certain number of volume that I kind of hit. And last question for you, as I know I said the last one was the last question, but you raised up a great point here, not to cycle through the same people quite a bit. Do you have a process for, let's say, like a breakup email, or like if they've been like, you've done maybe like 15 touches in a month, and just completely getting absolutely nothing? Like, is there something that you do, like a breakup email, and then B, do you ever delete them and then be like, hey, I'll try again in like 3-4 months? Like, what is your thought process on like prospects who just don't, they just don't engage with you, period?
So when it's really clear that it's not gonna be a matchup, or it's not going to be a potential customer, then I let them know that, like, in our industry, you can say, hey, I know next year you're going to be thinking about your contracts and your and what you're doing for your business. Do you mind if I reach out to you just beforehand, just to see if there's a chance it can be on the plate for you? And then I put that in my CRM, like, tasks set up for this date at this time for that customer, and I just sort of leave them alone for a period of time, unless I find something that's just like really interesting and I feel like they would appreciate it, and then I'll follow up with like a touch basis, maybe quarterly or something, with an informational email that, and I start those off with, I hope you don't mind if I share this with you, but I don't keep hammering somebody with the same information if they really don't want it, because I feel like at some point they're really going to clearly remember you for being totally insensitive and whatever, and that's going to impact how you can possibly be in a conversation with them later and be a solution. So no, I use the CRM even for long-term planning, a year out, and I don't ever really break up with some. Like, there's no deleting and putting them back. I'll just make notes to myself so that if I happen to accidentally open that account up, and then I'll see it clearly when I open the notes and kind of go back and review them, where it was at and standing. I'll see that to myself, like, okay, this is a sensitive customer. It's probably not a good idea to hit them with something today. So I'll just close that and leave it there and move on to the next thing.
Okay, so you definitely don't delete or anything like that. I love that. So, yeah. Theresa, can't thank you enough. Did you have fun today? Is this something that
oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, I love it. Thank you guys.
Yeah, no, we couldn't not have you
Right.
on here. It's awesome to have these different viewpoints. I know I've personally learned a lot today. I know our audience definitely has. How can the audience, if they want to get a hold of you, they want to watch Case of the Mondays, or they want to just see all your amazing content? Like you said, you kind of help on the international container side, but we definitely looking for just to engage with you. How can people get a hold of you, Teresa?
Um, well, definitely LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I pretty much have a poor work-life balance, so um, I'm there. I do a little bit of YouTube and Twitter. Twitter is kind of something I'm getting into now, but LinkedIn's definitely been. I think I've been on it 12 or 15 years or something like that. So it's definitely the platform where I flourish the most.
Yes.
And of course, my contact information is in my profile. So you can email me, call me, text me, all of it.
And make sure you don't text her after hours because she says she does have a bad work-life balance, but give her that respect as well. So I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. It's a great conversation starting your week with us, even though yesterday was Monday, but yesterday being the holiday. But with that being said, tomorrow is going to be Data Day with Dean Croak out of DAT Freight Analytics, and as well Jeff Dickinson join us to talk about the current freight market conditions. So with that being said, everybody stay safe, and we'll see everybody tomorrow. Thank you again, Teresa, and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.